So without further ado, we'll start at the end. Please just give a quick introduction, name, rank, serial number, what do you do, but don't start with a topic yet.
My name is Jeremy Clark, and I'm known online as Jeremy Bites, and I make developers better.
Woo, awesome.
My name is Deborah Kurata. I'm a MVP, Microsoft Most Valuable Professional. Is that what
Most
that
valuable
says?
professional, yes.
Yeah, and also a Google GDE, Google Developer Expert, which is basically the same thing with Google. And currently, I'm really focused on doing Angular developer. Anybody here Angular developers?
Oh.
Yay! Yeah, I've got a team.
Okay, fantastic.
I'm Damian Brady. I work for Microsoft as a cloud developer advocate, which means I do this for a living, which is good. I used to work at Octopus Deploy. I'm Australian, as you've probably noticed, living in Canada at the moment, so this weather's amazing. Thank you for that.
Awesome.
My name is Esteban Garcia. I'm a Microsoft ALM MVP based here in Orlando, Florida. I run a DevOps company. We help companies move to Azure through DevOps practices.
Fantastic. And I'm your host, Brian Randell, a partner with MCW Technologies, MVP, and general troublemaker. All right, and if Billy shows up, we'll let him introduce himself at some point. But in either case, Jeremy, as a user, so take off your developer hat for the moment, what do you prefer, what gives you the best experience, a native or web application?
I actually prefer web applications.
Okay, Deborah.
I prefer good applications.
Oh, already going off script. I knew I could count on our more esteemed professionals here, and here comes Mr. Billy Hollis. Come on up here, Billy. So we're just getting through introductions and the first question. Damian, native or web? Let me guess, good, but go ahead.
Well, now I'll say good native applications.
Good native applications. Esteban?
I'm with native applications. Good, bad, native.
Okay, good, bad, native. And Billy, do a quick introduction on who you are, just so people know that. And then the question is just a simple one. As a user, do you prefer web or native applications?
Okay.
By the way, you look absolutely dapper today, sir.
Well, thank you. For an old man, I do okay.
Yeah, you do.
A lot of VS Live people see me because we've been doing this a long time.
Yes,
haven't
we have,
Brian?
yes.
But I run a company in Nashville, Tennessee that does consulting mostly around native software. And our specialty is user experience, making things really good for the user. I've written a lot of books and speak in a lot of conferences, but I spend about 2/3, 3/4 of my time doing real projects for people.
Okay, so for you though as a user, if you just had to sit down as a computer and use something or a phone or whatever, native or web-based application?
I don't even understand why that's a question. Because a well-designed native application will beat the web every time.
Okay, stop. We're going to come back to that. Okay. Stop. That's good. Okay, now one more simple one, and then I'm going to let them go to town. Whoever is loud stage level. We're going to give Deborah the first real shot at this. Okay, same thing, really short. As a developer consultant, someone that has to enable customers to deliver value to their users, native or web?
I prefer native as a developer.
Okay. Deborah?
Web.
Damian?
Probably web.
Esteban?
Web.
Billy?
Well, as I said, we specialize in native, so that's what we prefer.
All right. Now at this point, we've got to get the basic. By the way, my preference as a user is, I have to, of course, take the bias of my friends here, good, but native, and I still love building native applications. JavaScript to me just gives me pain. It makes me hurt and cry. So, Deborah, go a little deeper on this good and web, and let's go to town, and then we'll let Billy argue with you, and you guys can just let it happen.
Well, we are all software users, right? In addition to being developers, we use software. And there is nothing that frustrates me more than software that, I'm trying to think of the right word I could use in a public setting, doesn't work as it should. How's there? It is very frustrating. And we were at Disney for 4 days. I brought my sister, we went and did Disney, and they have an app, and it looks like a nice app, but it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. There is no way to get to this other page without going through this one. You hit the back button on the phone, it takes you out of the app. It's like, why didn't it go back to my prior page? There are good applications, and I think the important thing is for all of us as developers to really be thinking about how good is our application? And then there are web applications like JCPenney's has an application where you can go register for a wedding, but it does not provide any way for you to define who you are. So the person gets the gift and has no idea who it's from, because it doesn't have any way, unless you're going to do, or have them wrap it, then they'll put a card with it. But if you don't want it wrapped, they will not tell them who it's from. I mean, there's just so much crappy software out there that, to me, that's more the bigger question. How do we write good software more so than web or native?
Okay, so Billy, one of the things you do is you help people with UX. I mean, that is one of your specialties. You said, though, native. So you think the combination of native and thoughtful design is better? Tell me why.
Well, I don't say that in an absolute sense.
Oh.
Because it depends upon whether or not an application requires reach and whether or not you control the devices that people have on it. So if you require reach, or you have to run lots of different devices and you don't control them, then HTML-based software is probably going to be a better option, because you're going to be able to reach the broadest audience. But that does not describe the majority of the software that gets produced in this country. The majority of the software that gets produced in this company in the corporate environments are aimed at users that you know what they've got. It's desktop software or it's tablets, and you know what the tablets are. For those circumstances, native user experiences can be designed to be significantly superior to what you can do inside the browser, partially because of speed and partially because, I guess I don't really want to go through all the factors. It's just practical to produce better user experiences there. You pay the price now that software, number one, only runs on a limited range of devices, and number two, you have to worry about deployment things that you wouldn't have to worry about in browser-based software. So you pay a price there. The question is that price then worth it for the additional productivity and intuitiveness and things like that? And for the typical corporate application, I think 2 times out of 3, the answer is, yeah, the native is a better match.
Okay, now Jeremy, you're Jeremy Bites. You're all about helping developers be better.
Yeah.
Do you find that the struggles developers have with just the fundamentals means that they have a built-in impediment to deliver good UX because they don't have the time or the budget to be trained properly to do it? What do you think?
I think that UX is something that you have to study, but most people don't. And trust me, I was coming to VS Live back in like 2007, 2008, and Billy has impressed me all of those years and just opened my eyes to some amazing ways of thinking about how we present data to users. I think the biggest thing was when he said, the reason we use data grids is because they're easy for the developer, they're not easy for the user. And that just changes the way that you approach things. And I lost track of the question in that, didn't I?
No, you did good, but I mean, for example, one of the things you do is you teach a lot of practical skills that developers maybe never got probably trained on. For example, async programming, right? So if I'm having to learn async versus making a good UI, right, I'm often forced down a path, aren't I?
Yeah, well, I have always been in the kind of the camp of let's make sure that our UIs are usable. Because I spent the bulk of my development career building line of business corporate apps. And we didn't always have a designer. In fact, we never had a designer. Right? That was me, I was the designer. But we had different skill sets in our small team. Some people were just like vomiting fields onto the page. And they were miserable to use. I was definitely thinking about what are the workflows that people are going through, what's the most, I'm all about understanding the users. How do they approach this problem? And then there were some people who had actually done some UX design study, and they were just making these amazing things. So I would love for everybody to create the best user experience possible, because as a developer, my job is to make the world better for my users. And if my software is difficult to use, I'm not making it better. So the user interface, the experience is definitely a huge part of that.
Okay. Now, Damian and Esteban both, you guys share a lot of commonality, you DevOps folks. I don't care who starts, but tell me why you guys flip-flopped on me, right? You're like, oh, this is what I prefer, but yeah, if I tell a customer I'm going to do the web stuff. Damian, you want to start?
Yeah. So the reason I said I prefer as a developer to use web is because that's my skill set. And that means that if you think about some value that I can add to the customer, whether that's through a new feature or fixing a bug or something like that, I am going to be 1,000,000 times faster writing for web to deliver that feature to the user than I would if I had to learn, native. But it doesn't really matter. Like if I was a native dev, then my ability to deliver value would be faster with native. So if you have a team that has been working on web stuff the entire time and you want to release a web app, then maybe they're going to deliver value a little bit faster if they start with the web, like mobile-focused websites. That's fine, but if at some point the value, the value balance kind of swaps over, and no, the value now that we need to deliver is the fact that this application sucks because we've got 12.5 gig loaded in the browser, embedded in a Safari thing in iOS. Clearly, I'm not a mobile developer. Then maybe the value is rewriting parts of it as native applications. So the focus, though, I think needs to be on, are you delivering value to the customer? If you're not, then you're doing the wrong thing anyway.
Okay. Now, Esteban, you help organizations, and so is it driven more by cost and things like that, or is it, what's driving it?
I'll piggyback on what Damian said. So one of the big things that people bring me in for is to help deliver that value to the customer. Not just add more features and they're going to be shelved somewhere and eventually get released. I want to be able to deliver that value to the customer so that the customer is using it and iterate quickly and have that release pipeline that allows users to get those new features very fast. And with web applications, I feel like you're able to do that a lot faster. Iterate quickly, get feedback of how people are using it right now, and then an hour later, give them a new experience. So that's the part that I look at it. I feel like you're able to much easier bring that to the customers. Now, you can certainly do that with native apps. There's just a lot more parts or moving parts that you have to account for, app stores and all those things. So I like the agility that the web gives me.
Okay. Now this one, I'm going to let you guys go because I'm going to kind of prime this one and let you go to town. Then I'm going to grab my mic and come to the audience. So we have this weird, some people consider it an abomination, Electron apps. And we have some interesting exemplars. Slack, anybody use Slack? Anybody go to management and say, I need a new 64 gig laptop to use Slack? Okay. But then we have VS Code, which is fairly amazing, can get kind of, especially if you get kind of crazy with all the extensions. What do you think about Electron? Because it's trying to be native, but it's this crazy, weird web stuff too. Billy? Deborah? Come on. Someone's got to have an opinion on Electron.
I think it's trying to make, it's neither fish nor fowl. It's trying to make people who have their experience in web technologies feel like they can leverage that into native instead of biting the bullet and learning the native technologies. And granted, and to a great extent, this is Microsoft's fault and Apple's. Because the native technologies for both Apple and for Windows are hard for developers to learn. And that there just isn't any way around that. Cocoa and Objective-C take a long time for you. But Apple's tradition has always been, you're a developer, just suck it up. You got to figure it out. Microsoft has never been that way until they got to XAML. And XAML is hard to learn. It's extraordinarily powerful. And can I pitch my session and say, I'm trying to show people how to think about it in a session this afternoon based on the lessons I've learned over years. But it takes a long time to get good at it. And so that means that if you come from a web background, your delta, see, you're paying just as big a price, I think, for web technologies because you're adding new frameworks and they're changing all the time. The difference is it's spread out over time. So you get to walk up to an app. The delta you've got to learn for that app for some new technology isn't that big. But the first time you walk into a native app in XAML, okay, who's done that and just felt overwhelmed in the first week? See, it's just an overwhelming technology. Now, when you learn it, you can do amazing applications faster than you can on the web. And I mean a lot faster, as in 3 times faster. But you have to pay that price at the beginning. And it's Microsoft's fault for not making that transition easier.
And the other thing I just want to mention is we also have PWAs. Anybody heard of PWAs? Couple? Okay. PWAs are progressive web apps. This is something that was started about 2 years ago with Google and Mozilla and is now picking up steam in the entire web industry. And the idea of a progressive web app is an app that you build for the web, but put in features so that it behaves like a native app. So things like you build your web app with a shell. You build your web app using service workers so that it can run offline. You build it with the ability to put an icon on the phone so that they can click on it instead of having to use their web browser to get at it. So this PWA is really picking up steam, and the Angular team in particular is working on features in order to make it very easy using their command line interface tool, the Angular CLI, to actually add PWA capabilities into your app. So then with just a few selections, like minutes worth of work, you can have your app work as a native looking application on a phone or other device. So that's something else that's coming down the path that's going to very much blur that native web picture.
You guys have any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, I'm less of a mobile dev. I think it was maybe even 10 years ago, I was looking at the icons that you could add to the home screen of your second generation iPhone or something for your website. And for the most, for a lot of companies, there was a tendency at that point to say, and even now, you go to their website on a mobile phone and it says, hey, go to the App Store and download our app that does nothing else that the website doesn't do, right? That's kind of developer-driven stuff. Developers wanted to write an app, or the business decided, everybody has an app, we need an app as well. That's not really delivering value. I understand what Billy was saying about how if you are competent in that technology, like if you have paid that price up front, you can deliver value really, really quickly. You can make changes, you can fix things, you can add new features really, really quickly up front. I guess the challenge with development teams as well is quite often you're not thinking, what's this application going to be used for in 10 years? Like, can we continually add features to it in 5, 10 years? You're thinking about, somebody's told me I have a deadline of 2 weeks from now to deliver a mobile application. How do I get it out the door using my current skill set? And that's a balance, I think, that companies have to decide on for themselves. If you can hire people who are experts in these technologies, great. Then it's probably worthwhile doing that. If you only have developers who know web technologies and you are on a deadline, you're going to end up writing web apps. And then maybe you'll pay the price, like Billy was saying, maybe you'll pay the price in 5 years when suddenly you're 30, 40 versions of Angular behind. Sorry. It's a trade-off, I guess.
And that trade-off gets expressed in lots of different ways, differently for corporate systems than, for example, software packages, OEM packages.
Yeah.
So we had a case study from last year, one of our big clients for 2016, early 2017, was some of you have seen the demo for this package that does propane management. Shops that sell propane and propane accessories. That's the software that takes care of such businesses. They had a native app that had a lot of features in it, a lot of capabilities in it. And they were challenged by a new web-based competitor who got their app out pretty quick, actually. And it looked modern. It looked better. They were starting to lose customers to this web app. And when they asked why, people said, well, your stuff looks stale. It looks like it's not a part of we don't want to base our business on something that looks like it's obsolete. And so that's when they called us in, and using native, we were able to leapfrog what people could do on the web. And so when they went to their last conference and showed this, everybody stopped going to the web app because you can do stuff for native better. But they had us do it with 10 years of XAML experience and then bring them along. Most companies are not in position to do that on their own. And that's the unfortunate drawback to the native space for Microsoft right now. I mean, if people want to do web stuff, I'm fine with that. I don't really hate it at all. And besides, when that situation comes up, that somebody does need native, the fact that everybody else is specializing in web means I keep raising my rates, and people keep
Always comes back to the
people
mighty
keep
dollar.
paying it. So that means that there are those spots where the value is there, and people are very, very much willing to pay. Yeah. But you have to pick out the situation where you do supply that value. Just doing a native app just because you like native doesn't make any more sense to me than just doing a web app because you know web.
So any questions? I got some more I can give, but does anybody in the audience want to say something or have a question for the panelists? Anybody? No, you guys are all shy? You had a question, all right. Let's get someone from the audience. I got more for you guys though.
I'm a developer and I don't fund projects. So my question is more about funding projects. Like, let's see, Damian mentioned something about the lifespan of an application. Do you think today when a company is spending money on the types of apps you're talking about, that they even have any long-range view at all, or is it just a quick-to-market, disposable thing? It's never going to be upgraded. We wrote it in Angular 1.0, and we don't care about the future of the platform. Next thing we're going to do is throw it away and write something else. Is that the trend these days?
I used to be in consulting, so my answer is it depends. Probably a good example would be the company I used to work for, Octopus Deploy. Does anybody know Octopus? Mm-hmm. Yeah, a handful of hands. Their first version of Octopus Deploy was written with, I think it was Angular 1. No, it was probably just plain HTML originally, backing onto SQL Server. And then they did a big rewrite for version 2 and embedded the database in RavenDB, and they used Angular 1 for the UI. And then when they went to version 3, they did another rewrite, or rewrite of a lot of it, moved back to SQL Server for various reasons, but kept the UI as Angular 1. They've just started talking about Octopus 4, and they are changing the UI again completely to React. Now, I've had mixed comments from people on that. There are people who say, yes, that's great because some of the pages were a bit slow and we needed to do something, and you've chosen React, fine, that's not a problem. But there's a lot of people who I've spoken to who have said, it sounds a bit like you haven't planned ahead and you're just picking the new technology and doing a rewrite every few years. And so I know, because I've worked at that company, I know their intention has never been, we don't know whether this product's going to last, so we may as well just do whatever we're doing now. It's always been a long-term view. But the technology, like they had to make decisions on, this is the best thing for us to do right now, with an eye to maybe making it easier to upgrade in the future. They have a long-term view and they are still having to rewrite every now and then. If the organization you have is trying something out, and this is a big thing in DevOps and Agile and stuff, is the experiment-based approach, then you might feel as a company it's not worthwhile spending 6 months to write this beautiful application using everything that runs incredibly fast, only to deliver the thing and realize nobody needs it anymore. You want to deliver something quickly and iterate on that as fast as possible. And the danger there is that you're going to pick technologies that aren't going to scale and aren't going to grow to your usage in a couple of years. So that's kind of why I say it depends. If the company is saying we're writing this application and we are absolutely invested in it for the next 10 years, which I think is a terrible idea, just personally, then they might spend a lot more time future-proofing it. But if they want to deliver something quickly, it doesn't necessarily mean they're not thinking towards the future. It might just mean that they need to deliver features now, I guess. That was a bit rambly, wasn't it?
I think it also makes a difference on the focus of the company, because what you're talking about is a software-focused company, because their purpose in life is the software. And if that's your purpose, I mean, you're constantly thinking about it and constantly thinking about how it can be better. And you have a team of developers there that are sitting there wanting something to do, so let's rewrite it in React or, whatever. But if you're looking at a corporate environment, you have a department over here that needs to upgrade their cost accounting or whatever that system that they have. You want to go in and do that once and then move on to the next department that needs help, and you're not revisiting them every 6 months going, well, let's rewrite your app in something else. So I think it makes a big difference if your company is focused on delivering services, or if your company is focused on building things that isn't software. I think there's a much different view of the fact, I mean, some of the software that we wrote in VB5 is still running at this bank that I know. They're using it for their Forex transactions, and it still works, and they're still using it, and that was, what now, 25 years ago? I mean, that was, I'm not that old, so it couldn't have been me that wrote it. It must have been my parents. But, you know, they meant for that to be written once and for it to live. And so I think how your company looks at its software really depends on what kind of you know, focus that it has with respect to that software.
Also, part of the problem is the way that people approach projects, right? They'll say, here's, I don't know, $1 million, go build something. And then we just try to fit as many features as we can within that budget, rather than thinking about what are the features that our customers are truly going to need or use, what are the features that are going to help us beat our competition, and rather than just having a line item at the end that says, and by the way, we need a mobile app, really thinking about where does the web come in, where does the mobile part come in, and what are people going to be using, and think about it from the feature perspective, right? That here's a bunch of money, go use it, and we don't really care about what's going to happen to the app 5 years from now. So it's a bit of a change of mindset that I'm starting to see, but still quite a bit of companies just think about it that way.
No, that's typical of people we talk to. Small to medium-sized businesses, let's say from 50 people up to 500 people or whatever, I think their typical investment cycle in internal software, if they're the kind of company you said, that technology is not their primary reason to exist, then they typically have investment cycles of 6, 8, 10 years that they expect to put in place a basic application, and they expect it to evolve and to new features to be added and changing conditions, but they expect the foundation of that application, the thing that people log into every day and the way that the database is basically structured, they expect that to last 6, 8, or 10 years, and they don't expect to be, and they can't afford, in many cases, to be redoing that every year or two. They just simply can't afford the talent, because talent is so critically short in this industry, and those are the guys who really can't afford to get a team of 5 or 6 people to master all the complexities, to keep evolving that thing all the time. And those are the guys who hate the evolution of web frameworks. They just hate it because they feel like they have to have this massive staff for nothing more than keeping up with the churn of things that are happening. And that's why a lot of those people tend to go to native, because those platforms tend to be more stable.
Yeah, and I actually ran into this because I worked in a corporate environment. Our applications would have a lifespan of 5 years, probably more. And there was a manager that came to me. He's like, yeah, we want to move to a web platform. You know, we're looking at these SPA frameworks. What should we do? And quite honestly, I said, I don't know. Because, yeah, if you say, well, each new application that we start, because, you know, they had a portfolio of 12 applications. Each time someone comes to us new, are we going to use the latest thing? Okay, well, that means our portfolio now says we have Knockout, and we have Angular, and we have React, and we have Vue, and we have whatever's next, Launcher.js, right? But the other choice is to say, oh, well, we're going to say Knockout, and everything we do in the future, we're going to stay on this technology. Well, where are you going to find JavaScript developers, probably today, who want to use Knockout? Because, of course, constantly retooling, we don't want to use that thing from 6 months ago, right? We want to use the stuff from today. So quite honestly, in that environment, I don't know what the answer is to that. And that's basically what I told him.
So any other questions? Right here.
How do you save users from themselves?
I'm sorry?
So how do you save users from themselves? So you have an existing application, they hear of a feature or there's something, they have this great idea, we need this in our app, and you know it's just abominable.
Are they paying you to implement that feature?
I wouldn't be there otherwise.
If you're getting paid and that's the most important thing that they think they want, do it, put telemetry around it, and then come back and shove the telemetry in their face to say, No, not shove it in their face, but you know what I mean. If you're implementing a feature and the feature doesn't get used, you need to be able to say this feature doesn't get used, we're not going to invest more time in it. That's all I'd say.
So, example of how you could gather telemetry from a web app.
So you could use something like application insights. By the way, I'm doing a talk on that later today. So anyways, there's many frameworks out there. Application insights, New Relic, many different frameworks out there. But the most important thing is to, as you're building these applications, put yourself in a production-first mindset. How am I going to measure that this button that my client asked me to add that I hate adding, how many times did it get clicked on? How many people actually got to that button and did it and walked away from it because they didn't like it? And then go back to the customer and say, look, this is not working. Let's not keep spending all this money on this, or making the button even worse, because no one's going to use it, and then move on, right? So short iterations, deliver something small, big enough to show whether something's going to be useful, and then decide at that point.
Billy, what do? You're a UX guy. How do you know, and how do you convince them to do the right thing?
Well, first of all, I don't see that as often as you might think, because when people call us, since we are user experience design experts, they have typically reached the point where they're going, we don't know what to do. That's why we're calling in experts.
Yeah.
So I don't see that as much, but you do see it from time to time. And the biggest thing, weapon that we use, first of all, to the point of telemetry, which is important, that's a routine part of our native application shells, is that every view that we're putting in has a unique ID. And so we capture the information about every time somebody navigates, we know it. And so we can turn on the telemetry and find out whether or not people are using things. And occasionally we do run into that. But a lot of that is based around individual features, right? There's this thing that you want. Ideally, when you're trying to help users achieve the best result, if you're trying to create the best system for them, it's above the feature level. It's at a more interaction level. And so what we typically put in front of people are multiple competing designs. And sometimes they will say, yes, I like that design, but I really want you to put the feature, my feature in that design. We usually are not having just one person make the decision. We're usually having a group. And if necessary, we'll put it to a vote and have the other people go, you know, I just would never use that. And so for us, and one of the keys is we don't say we won't do it. What we say is it's lower priority. We're gonna push that into a .1 version or a version 2 or something, because we just don't have the support for it among the rest of the users. And we're sorry that you really love this feature, but unless they can make a convincing case that they must have it for their job, then the users, we do not give the users final say. As much as we respect the users, my attitude is that the needs of the business come first. And you're right, the users are not always right. They don't always know. Understand, they're not UX design experts. They're experts in their jobs, and to the extent that they can say, this job requires me to do this, then now we will do it. But if it's just, gosh, this would be really cool, no, you don't get to decide that.
You sound like you're channeling little Steve Jobs. The user doesn't know what they want, but I do.
Yeah, well, they know their job, and they understand how to express what they need to do in their job. But the how of how they're, no, users don't know that. That's not their job. They don't know that any more than somebody coming out of a bad movie knows how to write a script for a good movie. They don't know.
Deborah, Jeremy, you guys want to add anything?
No.
Okay. Another question? Okay, I'm gonna go to the back and I'll come back up. And you have 1, 2. All right, hold on. I'll come all the way back to get my exercise because I'm a fat man. Moving. Look out of the way. All the way back. Well, you can make me run. All right.
So I had to write this question down. It kind of spans native or web, but getting to your point of I want to write an application, have it sit for 5 years, and then come back to it. Is that going to be a fundamental shift in the coming years in businesses to get out of that mindset? Because you even see Microsoft moving that way. We're seeing incremental versions of Visual Studio, Dynamics 365. These things are coming very quickly, and they're coming iteratively, which flies in the face of what every business person thinks is we're going to invest this money right now, and it's going to last for 5 or 10 years. which causes those issues of extremely expensive upgrades every 5 to 10 years that the company is always complaining about. Do you see businesses now in the future starting to adapt and say, you know what, we're going to write this application today and we'll probably have to revisit it maybe in a month or maybe in a year in order to continually keep it running versus taking on technical debt that you pay with a lot of interest later on?
Well, the awesome thing about software is it's easy to change. And the sucky thing about software is it's easy to change. So kind of the best, so I keep having this conversation with other developers, you know, how do we pick what to do when we're in this type of environment? And kind of the best conversation that I've heard so far has gone along the lines of maybe we should rethink the way we're thinking about software. And we've seen this a lot in the mobile world because, you know, from the desktop world, we were used to like the application that does everything, right? So Outlook, which manages your contacts and your calendars and your email and whatever else, notifications. Whereas in the mobile world, we kind of have, well, here's your application that does contacts and here's your application that does calendar. And they communicate with each other, but they're not so dependent on each other that we can't upgrade one without the other. So kind of the best idea I've heard is, you know what, maybe we need to start breaking down our software differently. So we can say, hey, you know what, we really need to kind of change this functionality. And you know what, it doesn't matter if this technology doesn't match this other technology, you know, as long as that base communication can happen. So I haven't really seen that happening, but you know, we kind of see, you know, Microsoft has given us that option with VS Code. You know, it said rather than Visual Studio, you know, here's code, which is an awesome editor, and if you want to put other things in your tool chain, great. Me personally, I'm a Visual Studio person because I just love having everything in one screen. But, you know, that gives us the options of what we can do. And as a user, I love options.
I think for the iterative design process, what you were talking about is having every app in your entire company being iteratively developed would be like almost a utopia kind of thing. I mean, wouldn't it just like be the perfect thing? But then we're talking about quadrupling, 10 times multiplying the number of developers we would need. Yeah. And where are all those people coming from? I just don't think that a corporation, especially one without a software-driven focus, a software product focus, can afford person-wise to devote that much time into every single one of the apps that run the business. And then you still have huge amounts of offshore development still being done, and then how does all of that fit in with the rest of the software? Because frequently that's meant to be given and used, and you know, they don't maintain it over time or anything like that too. And so how does that fit in to our utopia view of iteratively designing and developing and keeping everything up? I mean, from a user perspective, I think that would be fabulous because if there's something that's wrong, you're going to get it fixed relatively soon. If, you know, you can think of a better flow, you can get that adjusted. But I think from practicality, person, money, I just don't see how that could financially work for a big company.
Yeah, plus keeping up with all the technologies would be really, really difficult unless you try to have everyone doing the same thing, but that's just not practical at all, even keeping the same team, right? So
I would really like these projects to start becoming less like projects and more like, or treated less like projects and treated more like products. So rather than saying, here's $1 million to do this work, here's your start date, here's your finish date, that leads to developers and development teams writing all this software, trying to kick off all those features, and then at the end, adding quality and tests and deploying to production and things like that. And the danger with that stuff is that's the first stuff that goes out the window. Like, you write the code, nothing is delivered until 3/4 of the way through the project, and then you scramble in the last little while to do that kind of work. Even if the budget is $1 million, here's your start date, here's your finish date, whenever I did consulting, I really liked to, day one, have a hello world that is deployed to production. And then you've already developed to make it easy to change. And that gives you advantages during that project. So you're continually making changes and making sure that what's in production, for example, is still working and is still doing the right things. You can show the stakeholders and say, here's the product, are we going in the right direction? This kind of second decade agile stuff, so that people can see the output on the way through, not right at the end. And at the end, when the project is over, even if you don't revisit it for another 5 years, all the process that you've put into this of being able to make it easy to change and see those changes, it might be 5-year-old technology, but it's still probably going to work. So if you need to do 3 days work on it in 10 years, you can probably do those 3 days work much, much easier than if you cram that into the last week of your development cycle.
Yeah, I'm sure many of you have been the person who has to support something that no one's touched for 5 years, and then everyone's afraid to touch it. And then, you know, if you have a process in place with tests and the ability to deliver it, then it makes it a lot less risky and scary to go in there.
I think a better mental model for any well-done modern app is that it's built up out of pieces. It's composed. Mm-hmm. On the web, the main pieces are pages, but we can plug in sub-pages, et cetera. On the native platform, that means you don't have just a giant executable. You have some outer shell that manages the pieces the same way the browser does for web apps. And now you're looking at changing pieces. You're not looking at changing the app. You're not looking at, you may not even deploy anything but a piece. On the web, if you just change one of the pieces that plugs in, you just put a new page in place and the rest of it's still the same as it was. You can do native apps that way too. So compositional thinking of decomposing the functionality down into pluggable pieces that know how to talk to one another in certain ways is the way to think about it. And because if you do that, now you've got the ability to evolve the app just by addressing this piece. And this other stuff, this other piece may have been perfectly fine, and we don't touch it for 4 years because it's just doing its job. This piece, we got to evolve that. As the business changes, or because we didn't get it right in the first place, we got to evolve this piece to get it right. So you really think about it in terms of pieces. You don't think about throwing the whole app out and redeveloping. You think about redeveloping pieces over time.
So that topic actually goes directly to what my question was going to be with the push for microservices, really having a good service layer. So if we're making a choice on native or web, we're not fully committing. We may be committing in this moment, but is there danger in that? Is there danger that, hey, we know that the customer wants, or the business wants a web-based mobile app, but in our thoughts, we're thinking, I'm only gonna mostly commit to that web app, but I'm gonna make sure I have layers so if a native app comes, I can still reuse a lot. Just the thoughts on that.
That's good thinking. A service-based approach, that's the way we do everything we do because the majority of the applications we produce for clients have both a native part and a web part. The web part is typically something external facing. And we really want the same data architectures and such to be able to be shared by them. Microservices, we don't really go into a microservice architecture. That's probably more granular than we tend to go into, but I don't see any problem with it as long as microservices are not an excuse for failing to understand the problem before you start trying to solve it. That if you understand the problem, and microservices are a good approach because the nature of your services are very granular, then that really gives you a lot of flexibility going forward. But not all applications are really amenable to a microservice-based approach. It may be that the things we're producing for the user have to be kind of at a somewhat chunkier level than that.
Jeremy, I saw you nodding your head. Anything you want to add?
Oh, I totally agree with that.
Okay, easy peasy. All right, I think we're gonna do one more question, then we're gonna have some wrap up.
So, over time, I've been seeing more and more of things that I thought would force, features that I thought would force native. I want to do this, I want to access this, maybe individual pieces on a device. But over time, I've been finding more and more, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe, Photoshop could be done completely in the web. And what is it that's still out there that's forcing native, or maybe even something in the other direction? Are there specific features, specific requirements of an app that would force it one way or the other, regardless of what you might want to do?
I've got an answer to that from my own perspective, but I don't like hogging the stage.
IE6 is a problem, maybe?
IE6 is a problem.
IE6.
Well, personally, I'm amazed. As a technologist, I know I shouldn't be amazed by this stuff, but it's like how much the browser can do is kind of crazy. It's like there's a plugin for Chrome where I can display my desktop, through a Chromecast. I'm like, how can my browser get to my desktop? First of all, that scares the crap out of me. But second of all, I'm like, that's really cool. And I've been around for a while, so when we were doing like, GoToMeeting and that stuff, it was always, oh, download the plugin and it does all this stuff. But now you just open up a browser and it's like, okay, can I have access to your webcam and your microphone? And hey, how about your desktop? And it's just all through the browser. And I think that's really awesome. I know nothing about how that actually works, but it seems like that line is going away.
It's good to still have magic in your eyes when you do that. Anything else you guys want to add to that question?
No, I agree. It just seems like there's more and more that you can do with web. I mean, it used to be if it was going to have drag and drop, then it had to be native because there's no way you could ever drag and drop in JavaScript. I mean, all these rules that had been in place of where that line was has moved so much that it really is hard to point at something that would be really, the definitive line of if it's this, then it has to be that. I think that line is blurred.
Yeah, I think it's less of a technology decision, more of a how are your users going to access that functionality decision.
Yeah, I will make one comment related to that as a person who's had to poke at some of this stuff, is that there's still this need because of the way we get to what we consider the operating system. In other words, there's this hardware layer, the device, then there's this thing that runs in between. We consider things like Windows, Mac OS, iOS. And then the browsers are trying to be their own pseudo OS on top. And then what we have is what makes the magic happen, right, is they sneak more and more into the browser once it gets it. So if it's native, it's the native piece. So there's this weird thing that, as long as you get the browser on there and you get the right browser, all of a sudden magic happens. And I think that's kind of crazy.
That's true, but native applications don't stand still. I mean, I don't want to program the HoloLens in a browser, all right? Because I've got a platform for that's got all kinds of interesting things built into it that someday the browser will probably get there. So yeah, the browser moves forward, but native isn't standing still. Native is moving out there too. So yeah, there isn't any easy answer. Not to mention the fact that, again, for a lot of our clients, it's just cheaper to do it native to get the experience that they want. If they look doing that experience in the browser, they go, we'd like to, it just is going to cost too much for us to replicate that experience in the browser.
Now, some of you still have sessions today, so those of you who have sessions, I'll start with Jeremy. I don't remember everybody's schedule, so go through and tell me what's left for you today if people still want to see you or talk to you.
So I haven't done any talks yet, so you still have a chance. Right after lunch, I'm doing a design patterns talk, and then right after that, I'll be talking about dependency injection.
Okay, and you'll be at our networking event at 4 o'clock in this room. Okay, so you can do some one-on-one chatting. Deborah, are you done?
No, I haven't started yet either. I have 2 Angular talks right after lunch, Angular forms and Angular routing.
Okay. Damian, I know, has a talk.
Yeah, after lunch I'm doing a deploying straight to production talk, which is not what it sounds. It's pretty close to what it sounds, actually.
You're not going to take down Azure, are you?
I will try not. You can never promise to not take down Azure.
Okay.
So right after Damian, I'm doing a talk on application insights. So adding telemetry to your applications and how to manage those.
And Billy, I know you said you had something.
Yeah, I have a talk on composition in XAML, because XAML is a very powerful compositional platform, and people don't use it as effectively as they should because we haven't kind of turned our minds into thinking about things in a compositional way. So this session is to help you move a little bit further along that path.
All right, and then just 1 minute or half a minute each, just your last thoughts on native versus web, if you were to summarize your worldview.
Just make the users happy. The reason I said web from a user perspective is just consistency, because there's some where the app on iOS does something different than the app on Android, which does different from the browser that I'm used to using on my desktop. So as a user, that drives me crazy. Just give me the same experience on all the devices.
Okay. Deborah?
I just want it to be good. I want it to work. I want it to do what would be the most obvious thing for it to do, whether that's a web app or a native app. And if you are doing web, to start looking at PWAs, because from a developer's point of view, that might be an answer for you.
Damian?
I think the biggest thing would be work done to make your code easy to change or make your software easy to change is never wasted work. If you need to change your mind later on, composition's a good example. If you need to change your mind later on, you will definitely thank previous you for making it easier to change.
Esteban?
Just don't be a feature factory. Deliver the right features to the customer and have those features driven by how the customers are using your application. You need a way to measure, so put that in there and then always give your customer a say into the backlog.
And Billy?
I think if you're a consultant, you should definitely do nothing but write web apps. And that way, I'll be able to raise my rates another $100 an hour for people who want to do native.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I will say, from my perspective, be good humans, deliver a quality experience no matter what platform it's on. Please give a warm round of applause for our panelists. And on that note, be good humans, don't fight, food's outside the door. Thank you.